Welcome to this special edition of Poetic Lines. Today my guest is Gloria Mindock, the founding editor of Červená Barva Press and the owner of the Lost Bookshelf bookstore in Somerville, Massachusetts. Widely published in the U.S. and abroad, her work has been translated into 10 languages. Gloria has published 6 books of poems. Her most recent is Ash from Glasslyre Press. Gloria's awards include the Speak Up Talk Radio Firebird Book Award for Ash and the Ibbotson Street Press Lifetime Achievement Award. She also received the Allen Ginsberg Award for Community Service by the Newton Writing and Publishing Center. In 2017 and 18, Gloria was the Poet Laureate of Somerville. In addition to those achievements, Gloria worked as a clinical director and counselor in addiction for 39 years. She has also taught many poetry workshops in the Boston area. Those details only hint at her indomitable spirit and her unwavering commitment to promote poetry and good poets. Gloria, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here. Would you read a poem for us?
Yes, thank you, and it's great to be here. This poem is called Baked. With a rolling pin in my hand, I roll your heart out flat, stop it from beating. The redness of blood turns to wax, sticky while wet. I mix it with flour for consistency. Mind you, you never had this. Skin is added for extra flavor. After cutting up a few veins, my creation is ready to bake. Once out of the oven, all crisp, all beautiful, the door is opened and I throw it out for the birds. Peck away, my friends. Eventually, all men get flown.
That is a searing poem. It sounds like a relationship that went wrong, but yet you're transforming it through poetry. What made you decide to read that poem?
I just like it. It's kind of silly in a sad sort of way, like don't mess with me or this is what's going to happen with you. And birds are such a wonderful image, when you see them pecking away. And I thought that's what a man needs if he's bad.
Well, I love the humor and the sharp wit in the poems in your new collection, Ash. What made you start writing those poems?
Well, bad relationships seems to be a topic for everyone. At my job, my clients would tell me all their horrible relationship problems on the street, on buses. Everybody tells me their problems, and it usually is bad relationships. So I decided I wanted to do something about it and write about it, but it needed a twist rather than poems so full of woe is me. So I added fire and ashes and kind of like fireman terms, things like that in the poems to help spice it up a little.
Those images would certainly resonate with anyone who has had a bad relationship. Would you tell us about the structure of the book?
Okay, well, it's divided into 4 sections, is the first one. And so it kind of ties in with the phrase, you burnt me, I was burned. So I took off with that image for the first section. The second section, Baked, well, you could see with what I just read. And so that section kind of deals with that. The third, Buried, so it comes into graves more. And the fourth, Opposition, which was my favorite to write because I watch a lot of true crime and murder shows, and I just love it. So I thought I would have a little fun with the last section. So it's basically the man in the first section, the woman in the second section of each poem.
There are many references to sky in the poems in Ash. What does the sky represent to you?
Heaven, a calmness, beauty, and it's gorgeous. And so I like to use that in a lot of the poems.
Your work has been described as dark, yet you are one of the most upbeat, positive people I know. Does writing about the darkness in life somehow help you to feel hopeful?
Well, I would say there's always hope, no matter what happens in life. Um, yes, I'm upbeat and cheerful all the time, mostly. I think people need to hear about the bad things in life. Everyone experiences bad things. Sometimes to be reminded or to work towards change. There's always hope. I never give up on hope for anything. But I would say I want people to wake up with what's going on around them. There's so many countries where people are being slaughtered. And as usual, the world turns a blind eye. So, how do you balance such horror with beauty? So, I always like to stress hope. Yes.
You've described yourself as a spiritual person, and many spiritual traditions talk about the concept of beauty for ashes. And you have to give up the ashes in order to get the beauty. Does that idea resonate for you?
Yes, I mean, there is a beauty in ashes itself, tying in with spirituality. Um, Many people think, well, destruction, ashes. But really, when a person dies and turns to ashes, it is a beautiful thing. Sometimes with society, many years ago, people used to wear ashes in their jewelry to show respect for someone that they loved. So it can be a beautiful thing instead of so sad. I don't think I could wear ashes around my neck of a loved one. It would feel kind of too morbid for me, but I understand why some people like the beauty of that. And again, tying in the sky, that's beauty, that's heaven to me. So ashes doesn't always have to be bad.
So it almost sounds as though for you, ashes aren't just the result of ruin, but they also hint at transcendence in a way.
Yes. Just like I was raised Catholic, but I adopt many religions really into me to come to spirituality. And I do practice Lent though, so I give up something I love. And so I think ashes is kind of almost a resurrection in some ways, a penance. So bad relationships, you have ashes.
Say a little bit more about that. So after the ashes of a bad relationship, then what?
Uh, then comes the hope, where you try to rebuild your life. Um, there's always hope and there's always goodness that will come into life if you let it. So ashes doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing.
You have worked with addicts, which is not easy, and you have worked with veterans who have dealt with a lot of different challenges. How did you help them find a sense of hope?
Well, the way I speak to them, encouragement, telling them they can get by, they can do this, keep it in a day. And AA stresses that. So we were AA based. And so, this is horrible to say, but some of the staff that I worked with over the years seemed to make judgments sometimes, and that always made me mad because there's hope for everybody, and I have seen miracles. So I try to stress the hope. You can change, you can do this with help, and try to help them as they struggle. So I believe in miracles, and I feel I have seen it with many of the clients. And then I have seen the sad part where many have died. Heroin is a horrible addiction. And that is, one of the saddest things, to witness somebody dying, or Narcan doesn't quite bring them back to life.
It sounds as though you were seeing people in a way that they hadn't seen themselves before. And sometimes just knowing that somebody else sees goodness in you can help you see it in yourself.
Mm-hmm. And they know if you care or not. I mean, anybody can tell if somebody really cares and wants to help them. As to somebody that might be condescending or, not care, it's really easy to pick that up. And I always showed that, that I do care. I separate myself, of course, otherwise I would not get any sleep at night. And I learned to do that. Otherwise I'd go crazy. But when I'm there, I always gave it over 100% to help them.
How did you start writing poetry?
Well, back in 1982, actually, is when I started. I used to write experimental plays, and then I switched to poetry. And when I was in college, there was this really old library, and I used to disappear there and pull out books of poetry. And that's where I discovered Matthew Arnold. Keats and Shelley were in high school, of course, reading them, and I loved them. But usually at that time, I was like, get away from me with that stuff. But then in 82, I changed and I loved it. And I started writing experimental poetry before I started writing the serious poetry. And I loved it. I just had a blast with it. And I'm really glad that I switched from writing, experimental plays to the more serious things in poetry.
Does a poem start for you as an image, a sound, or an experience?
I would say an experience, whether it's watching TV, something will trigger something someone said. I watch a lot of witness accounts for writing about the atrocities, and also have talked to people personally that have experienced some of the things. So that triggers me definitely for writing. And then I'm off and running. Sometimes an image. There's some beautiful photographs that really strike me in the heart. They're, war photographs, and they're not pleasant sometimes to look at, but they're really done beautifully, if such a thing can be beautiful. And that will get me writing too.
Well, you are a witness, not only as a poet, but as a publisher as well. And you have given voice to many people who otherwise would not have ever had a book of their own work.
I love publishing other writers, and it's really exciting to me. I'm like a little kid when a book comes out. It's like, yippee! And there's just nothing like it. And it feels good to me to do such a thing. And starting the press, and it's 16 years old now, I've met so many wonderful people from all over the world. And I feel like it's bridging the gaps culturally between all of us. I learn about them, they learn about me. The translations are wonderful. I really love the writers, that I publish their work. They're really quite wonderful. And so again, there's just nothing like it. I've done about probably 210 books now, maybe 215, I'm not quite sure. But it's kind of overwhelming when I think of it. I didn't expect to do that much, and I'm so happy that I did, and I'm going strong yet. So,
how did you decide the name of the press?
Well, actually, I wanted Red Blood, and I thought, oh, that's too gory. I can just hear what's going to be said about that. So I thought, what can be less gory, maybe? And I came up with Red Color. But I wanted it to be in Czech because Václav Havel is a hero to me. He was a dissident, a wonderful playwright, weird stuff he wrote. And I just loved him, and I loved what he did. And communism fell there peacefully. And so I wanted to honor him. So I decided, on a Czech name. And I had a client actually that was from the Czech Republic. And I asked him how to say Red Color in Czech. So he wrote it out for me. And a funny story is when I had my first Červená Barva Press reading in New York City, I didn't know how to say the press name. And so a friend of mine wrote it out phonetically for me, and I still slaughter it to this day because Czech people say it so beautifully, and I sound like bleh. So, but they accept me. They know I can't pronounce things quite like they do.
Well, you have given voice to many women and girls. Why is that important to you?
Because I feel it's still a man's world, and I know I'm going to get flack for that, but I really still feel it. And I think things need to change and be more open for women editors, publishers, and all the jobs, all the fields, I should say. And so I want to see a change in that. And I like to bring the voice of women forward in the writing, in the books I publish. There's some amazing, amazing writers, and some of them have been through so much in their countries, and I want their voice to be heard. So that's why I focus on that too. And of course, I publish many men writers too. So I guess you could say I'm a mix, but I think it's important for women to be heard.
I agree. Do you ever get feedback from some of the women that you publish in foreign countries? Does having a book change them?
I think so. One woman I published is from northern Iraq, Uzbekistan. I think I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And when I published her, she was just thrilled about it. And it's hard sometimes in some countries for women to be published because of maybe the government that they are under. It's hard to have that freedom. And not only women, for men too. There's this writer in Africa, Mabizvo, and I published an interview with him, and I left it in his own words. Well, he's in hiding now because the government is after him. So it's really frightening. I mean, that's all I can say about it, because I feel like they're kind of watching for what is said about him to find him. So I've been really careful about that, especially on Facebook and things like that. So it felt good to at least publish that interview of him. I didn't publish a book by him, but, hopefully someday, and some other writers. There's so many countries that it's just, I don't know how to say it. It's just so, wonderful to bring them here, to bring their work here to be read.
It seems to me that in almost everything you do, you are bridging the gap in some way. When you were serving as Poet Laureate of Somerville, what did you hope that you would help people understand or learn about poetry?
That it is accessible. Sometimes people hear poetry, oh God, get away from me. And I wanted to show the community that it is accessible, that they can listen to it and enjoy it, all different types of poetry, not just one kind. And one of the things I did is I brought poetry out into the streets, and we stood on corners and just read. Some people walked by and ignored us. Some listened, and some kind of gave us looks like, you're nuts. And it was really so much fun. And I didn't care what people thought. I wanted to say, here, listen. The other thing is to an elderly, like nursing type home, we did music and poetry there. And there was a nun who was there, and she loved Andre Gritzman's poetry. I shared one of his poems, and so I gave her the book, and you would have thought I gave her the world. And that made me feel good because that was outreach. And I also leave poetry and fiction books all over Somerville for free for anybody to take. I started a program called Read America Read. So far I've left over 3,000 books for people to take for free. And I have other editors and writers in the area and all over the country that do the same thing. And the pandemic kind of put that to the pits for a while, but hopefully now it'll pick up again.
What is the biggest challenge of being a publisher?
Oh gosh, horrible manuscripts that aren't clean, that are all over the place. And I think probably in the 16 years, maybe a couple people feeling entitled. That's really challenging when you deal with someone like that, or a manuscript that is just, really hard to lay out. And then trying to figure out some stuff. So now I don't accept manuscripts that are a mess. I'm not going to fix them. They have to send clean manuscripts and done. Another challenge is when they want to change something. I say no changes once I start the layout, and they want to change this and that. And I say no now because it wastes my time, and I put hours into getting it just right. And so I don't want to have to do it over, and it makes me not happy. I should put it that way. So that's a challenge.
What's the biggest delight about being a publisher?
Accepting a manuscript. It is so exciting. And when it comes out as a book, I just love it. I can't even describe the feeling. And I'm so happy for the author. It just feels good.
The pandemic has been challenging for many people. How has it impacted you as a poet?
It made me work. I used it as a writer's retreat, and I wrote more than I ever have in this past year, which feels really good because I'm a sporadic writer. Usually I can go 3 months, 4 months without writing, and then all of a sudden write like a banshee out of hell every day, like going crazy. So it is nothing to me to stop writing for a while. I know some of my friends have to write every day, but I don't. But the pandemic, it was good for me. I have, believe it or not, 5 manuscripts in the work. They're nowhere near completed, but all these ideas were flowing in my head, and I thought, oh, I'll do this. Oh, I'll do that. And it felt actually good, and it was inspiring. And I tried, I watched the news a lot too, but I didn't let the pandemic get to me because some of it was, so horrifying. All the people that died and sick, and some still recovering even. And it's just so weird that such a thing happened in our lifetime.
How has poetry changed you over the years?
Wow, that's a tough question. I don't know if it has changed me. I think writing about the things that I write about is change. Instead of talking about it or keeping it quiet, my thoughts on things, now I put it into poetry. So maybe that's a change. The atrocities, before I would think all these things, now I write about it. I want people to know what's going on. And again, not turn a blind eye to the horrible things that are happening. It's a horrible world in some ways. There's a lot of evil, and that has changed me. I want to write about that, and I need to. It is my calling.
So where does your sense of hope come from?
I don't know. I've always had hope in me for numerous things, and I think the biggest thing is just for people to be kind to one another, no matter where you're at. I've always had this belief that it does make a difference. I don't understand sometimes how people can be mean, kill each other, even the ethnic killings, all the things that we hear about and have witnessed, maybe watching it on the news, of course, and what we read.
What else gives you a sense of hope Is there an underlying belief, maybe, that shapes your worldview?
I would say my faith will shape my worldview, definitely. My faith gives me hope in the way I was raised. I have many priests in my family, Pope John the 23rd. And so those things mean a lot to me. And just the way I was raised to respect everybody, to be a good person. And as trite as that may sound, deep inside me, I always carry that with me. I always try to be kind and give hope and feel hope. If I didn't feel hope, what's the use of living, really, for any of us?
I agree with you. And it sounds as though the members of your family who are priests or have devoted themselves to a religious life, that what they're really doing is devoting themselves to the idea that there is a force for good in this world. And that force underlies what we see and experience even when we're not aware that it's there.
Mm-hmm. I think so. And I like to believe most people have hope. Most people are kind and good. It's just the few that I call evil that can just kill to kill, or for whatever they believe, but killing innocent people, that I have trouble with. And that has been around probably since the beginning of time.
Why do you think poetry is such a powerful art form?
Because of what it says. It's, for me, it makes me tick. I come alive when I read poetry, especially many of the poets from overseas, Eastern European writers, their use of language. It just does so much. I sit sometimes and I think, oh my God, why didn't I write that? Or what a great line. And I think there's nothing like that when you're reading someone else's work, and then you develop your favorites that you really love. And many of my books I go back to over and over again. So that just makes me tick. I have so many poetry books, so many translation books. And I think I would just die if anything happened to those books, but just makes me happy to read the other work.
Well, the literary world certainly needs your efforts and your talents. Would you read another poem for us?
Sure. The crosses. We have broken crosses in our drawer. Why are they still here? It is a sin to throw out the symbol of Christ. We would fall from grace. The sacraments received on Sunday would be for nothing. So here they are, buried by papers, screws, ink pens, pennies, a few rubber bands. How sad, Christ defending himself from junk. Where is his heart? Take the crosses out. Let him breathe. Put the pieces in every room, out in the open, each one giving testimony to your life.